The Papal Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi is the mother church of the Roman Catholic Order of Friars Minor, commonly known as the Franciscan Order, in Assisi, a town of Umbria region in central Italy, where St. Francis was born and died. The basilica is one of the most important places of Christian pilgrimage in Italy. With its accompanying friary, Sacro Convento, the basilica is a distinctive landmark to those approaching Assisi. It has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2000. The basilica, which was begun in 1228, is built into the side of a hill and comprises two churches known as the Upper Church and the Lower Church, and a crypt where the remains of the saint were interred. The interior of the Upper Church is an important early example of the Gothic style in Italy. The upper and lower churches are decorated with frescoes by numerous late medieval painters from the Roman and Tuscan schools, and include works by Cimabue, Giotto, Simone Martini, Pietro Lorenzetti and possibly Pietro Cavallini. The range and quality of the works gives the basilica a unique importance in demonstrating the development of Italian art of this period. History. The Franciscan friary and the lower and upper basilicas of Francis of Assisi were begun in honor of this local saint. Immediately after his canonization in 1228, Simone di Pucciarello donated the land for the church, a hill at the west side of Assisi, known as Hill of Hell, where previously criminals were put to death. Today, this hill is called Hill of Paradise. On 16 July 1228, Francis was canonized by Pope Gregory IX in Assisi, and he laid the foundation stone of the new church the following day. Although construction may already have been begun, the construction having been begun at his order, the Pope declared the church to be the property of the papacy. The church was designed by Maestro Jacopo Tedesco, who was in those days the most famous architect. The construction was supervised by Brother Elias of Cortona, one of the first followers of St. Francis and the former Vicar General of the Order under St. Francis. The lower basilica was finished in 1230. On Pentecost, the 25th of May 1230, the remains of St. Francis were brought in a solemn procession to the lower basilica from its temporary burial place in the Church of San Giorgio, now the Basilica of St. Clare of Assisi. The burial place was concealed for fear that St. Francis's remains might be stolen and dispersed. The construction of the upper basilica was begun after 1239 and was completed in 1253. Both churches were consecrated by Pope Innocent IV in 1253. Pope Nicholas IV, a former Minister General of the Order of Franciscans, raised the church to the status of papal church in 1288. The Piazza del Loggia, the square leading to the church, is surrounded by colonnades constructed in 1474. They housed the numerous pilgrims flocking to this church. In 1818, the remains of St. Francis were rediscovered beneath the floor of the lower basilica. In the reign of Pope Pius IX, the crypt was built so that the faithful might visit the burial place of the saint. On 27 October 1986 and January 2002, Pope John Paul II gathered in Assisi with more than 120 representatives of different religions and Christian denominations for a World Day of Prayer for Peace. Earthquake of 1997. On the morning of September 26, 1997, two earthquakes hit that region of Italy in rapid succession, registering 5.5 and 6.1 respectively on the Richter scale. There was widespread devastation and many ancient buildings were destroyed or damaged. While a group of specialists and friars were inspecting the damage to the Basilica of St. Francis, an aftershock shook the building, causing the collapse of the vault. Two Franciscan friars who were among the group and two of the specialists were killed. Much of the cycle of frescoes of the life of St. Francis by Giotto in the upper church of the basilica were slightly damaged, whereas those of the sections of the vault which collapsed were almost entirely destroyed. The church was closed for 2 years for restoration. Architecture. The church was designed by Maestro Jacopo Tedesco on 2 levels, each of which is consecrated as a church. They are known as the Basilica Superior, generally called the Upper Church, and the Basilica Inferior, generally called the Lower Church. The lower church was structurally a large crypt supporting the upper one. In the 19th century a lower crypt was constructed beneath the basilica. Architecturally, the exterior of the basilica appears united with the friary of St. Francis, since the lofty arcades of the latter support and buttress the church in its apparently precarious position on the hillside. The architecture is a synthesis of the Romanesque and Gothic styles, and establish many of the typical characteristics of Italian Gothic architecture. As originally built, both upper and lower churches had a simple cruciform plan with an ashless nave of 4 square bays, a square crossing, a transept that projected by half a bay one each side, and an apse, the lower being semicircular and the upper polygonal. To the left of the church stands a freestanding bell tower of Romanesque design. The lower church was built entirely in the Romanesque style, having a low semicircular ribbed cross vaults over the nave and barrel vaults over the transept arms. However, the space has been greatly extended with a number of lateral and transept chapels added between 1350 and 1400. The main entrance to the nave is through an ornate Gothic doorway built between 1280 and 1300, and later enclosed with a simple Renaissance-style porch of 1487 by Francesco da Pietrosantur. Set in the tympanum of the Gothic doorway is an ornate rose window which has been called the eye of the most beautiful church in the world. The upper church has a facade of whitewashed brick divided into 2 horizontal zones of about equal height, and with a simple gable of height equal to the lower zones. There is a single large doorway in the Gothic style, divided by a column and with a rose window set in the tympanum above the 2 cusp arches. Above the door, in the second zone, is a large and ornate rose window in which most of the decorative details are Romanesque in style. Surrounding it are carved the symbols of the 4 evangelists, combining with the window to create a square composition. Above it in the gable is an ocular window. To the left of the facade and visible from both the forecourts of the upper church and the lower church is the Benediction loggia in the Baroque style, which was built in 1754, when the church was raised to the status of basilica. Internally, the upper church maintains Brother Elia's original simple aisleless cruciform plan. Like the lower church, there is a nave of 4 bays with ribbed cross vaulting. Unlike that of the lower church, it is only the diagonal ribs which are of semicircular form. The transverse ribs are pointed in the Gothic manner, and thus rise to the full height of the wider diagonal ribs. Each group of ribs springs from a group of clustered columns. Externally the columns and vault are supported by stout buttresses of semicircular plan. Unlike the lower church, the transepts also have ribbed vaulting. There are tall Gothic windows with geometric tracery in each bay of the nave and in the polygonal apse of the chancel. The windows of the apse are believed to have been created by German craftsmen active around Assisi at the end of the 13th century. The windows on the left-hand side of the nave were made by a French workshop, while those on the right-hand side are attributed to the workshop of Maestro di San Francesco. These stained glass windows are among the best examples of 13th-century Italian glasswork. As is characteristic of Italian church architecture, the main decorative feature, and the main medium used for conveying the church's message is fresco, rather than stained glass. The earliest frescoes are some of those in the lower church. The work proceeded with a number of different projects and appears to have involved numerous artists, some of whom are as renowned as Cimabue and Giotto, but many of whom are no longer known by name. Upper Basilica. This bright and spacious basilica consists of a single 4-bay nave with cross-vaulted ceiling bordered with patterns of crosses and leaves, a transept and a polygonal apse. The 4 ribbed vaults are decorated alternately with golden stars on a blue background and paintings. The second vault is decorated with roundels with busts of Christ facing street, Francis and the Virgin facing street, John the Baptist. The entrance vault gives us the four Latin doctors of the Church: Saint Gregory facing street, Jerome and Saint Ambrose facing street, Augustine. These are ascribed to the Isaac Master. The choir has 102 wooden stalls with carvings and marquetry by Domenico Indovini. In their center, on a raised platform, stands the Papal Cathedral. The west end of the transept and the apse have been decorated with many frescoes by Cimabue and his workshop. The magnificent crucifixion, with Saint Francis on his knees at the foot of the cross, stresses again the veneration of the Passion of Christ by Saint Francis. Sadly, the frescoes of Cimabue soon suffered from damp and decay, due to the use of lead oxide in his colors and to the fact that the colors were applied when the plaster was no longer fresh. They have deteriorated and have been reduced to photographic negatives. Prior to him there had been some decorations in the upper right-hand section of the transept by a northern master, probably an English artist. He realized the two lunettes and the roundels on the west wall with paintings of the angel and the apostles. Another master, the Roman master, painted the Isaiah and the David and the remainder of the wall under the eastern lunette. The upper part on both sides of the nave, badly damaged by the earthquake of 1997, was decorated in 2 rows with in total 32 scenes from the Old Testament and the New Testament, while the upper register of the entrance wall is covered with 2 frescoes: Pentecost and Ascension of Jesus. Since it took about 6 months to paint one bay of the nave, different Roman and Tuscan masters, followers of Cimabue, have performed this series of scenes, such as Giacomo, Jacopo Torretti and Pietro Cavallini. The 2 frescoes of the life of Isaac in the middle register of the third bay are traditionally ascribed to the young Giotto, but even this has been controversial. Many critics esteem these the work of the anonymous Isaac Master and his workshop, deducing from stylistic details, attesting to his Roman background. Some think that the Isaac Master may have been Pietro Cavallini or a follower. Pietro Cavallini had painted around 1290 a similar fresco, Isaac blessing Jacob, in the convent of the Church Santa Cecilia in Trastevere in Rome. The position of the resting Isaac looks like the same position of the Virgin in Cavallini's mosaic Birth of the Virgin in the apse of the Church Santa Maria in Trastevere in Rome. The Isaac Master is considered one of the first practitioners of the true fresco technique, which revolutionized mural painting for the subsequent centuries. But the most important decorations are the series of 28 frescoes ascribed to the young Giotto along the lower part of the nave. Each bay contains 3 frescoes above the dado on each side of the nave, 2 frescoes in the east galleries beside the entrance, and 2 more on the entrance wall. Giotto used the Legenda Maior, the biography of Saint Francis by Saint Bonaventure, to reconstruct the major events in the life of Saint Francis. The prototype for this cycle may have been the Saint Francis cycle by Pietro Cavallini in the Church San Francesco Arepa in Rome. The paintings are as vivid as if Giotto had been a witness to these events. According to Vasari, they were executed in the period between 1296 and 1304. However, the authorship of Giotto is disputed, due to the ambiguous attributions given in early descriptions of this work. Many Italian critics continue to support the authorship of Giotto and his workshop, but because of small differences in style with the frescoes of Isaac, it is thought that several or even all of these frescoes were painted by at least 3 separate painters, using the original concept of Giotto, the master of Legend of Saint Francis, the master of the Obsequies of Saint Francis, and the Cecilia master. The first span of the ceiling is decorated with frescoes of the 4 doctors of the Church, attributed either to a young Giotto or to one of his followers. The third span presents 4 heart-shaped medallions of the Christ, Mary, John the Baptist and Francis, painted by Jacopo Torretti. The cuspidate facade of the upper basilica has a portal in Gothic style with twin doors and a beautiful rose window.